Jake Morrison gripped the controls of the Starbound Explorer as the ship shook violently around him. Red warning lights flashed across every panel in the small bridge while alarms screamed through the corridors. The ion storm had come from nowhere, appearing on their sensors just moments before it hit them like a giant invisible fist. "Hull breach on Deck 3, shouted Nick Daniels from the engineering station. His hands moved quickly over the controls as sparks flew from damaged circuits. Behind him, "I'm losing power to the main engines." Lisa Carter held tight to her seat at the science station. Her face was pale as she watched the readings on her screen. "The storm is getting stronger," she said. "We need to get out of here now." Amy Brooks worked frantically at the communications console. Static filled the air as she tried to send a distress signal back to Earth. "No good," she said. "The storm is blocking everything. We're on our own." Jake felt sweat run down his face as he fought to keep the ship steady. Through the main view screen, he could see the strange colors of the ion storm swirling around them like an angry ocean. Lightning jumped between the charged particles, and each flash made the ship's systems flicker. "There," Jake said, pointing at his navigation display. "Planet Kepler 442c, it's our only chance." The planet appeared on their screens as a blue and green world covered in thick clouds. It looked peaceful compared to the chaos of the storm around them. Jake had studied the reports about this system during their journey. The planet was supposed to be safe, with breathable air and no signs of intelligent life. "Can we make it?" Lisa asked, her voice tight with worry. Jake looked at the distance readings and then at their failing engines. "We have to," he said. He pushed the ship harder, using every bit of power they had left. The Starbound Explorer was a good ship, built for exploration missions like this one. But it was never meant to handle something as violent as the ion storm that had caught them. The ship groaned and shuddered as they broke free from the storm's grip. For a moment, Jake felt hope as the alarm stopped screaming. Then Nick's voice cut through the brief quiet. "Main engines are gone," he said. "We're falling fast." Jake switched to emergency thrusters, but they were weak compared to the main engines. The planet grew larger in their view screen with each passing second. He could see the surface now, covered in dark forests and mountain ranges. It looked wild and untouched. "Everyone hold on," Jake shouted. "This is going to be rough." The ship hit the planet's atmosphere like a stone thrown into water. The hull began to heat up as they fell through the thick air. Jake tried to angle their descent toward what looked like a clearing in the forest, but the controls were barely responding. Trees rushed up to meet them. Jake could see individual branches and leaves now. At the last second, he managed to level the ship out just enough to avoid hitting nose first. The Starbound Explorer crashed through the forest canopy with a sound like thunder. Branches tore at the hull as they smashed through tree after tree. The ship bounced once, twice, then slid across the floor before finally coming to rest against a massive tree trunk. Smoke poured from the damaged engines, and the smell of burned circuits filled the air. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Jake slowly lifted his head from where it had been pressed against his console. Blood ran from a cut on his forehead, but he was alive. "Sound off," he called out. "Everyone okay?" "Still here," came Nick's voice, shaky but strong. "Bruised, but breathing," said Lisa. "Same here," added Amy. Jake unbuckled himself from his chair and stood up slowly. His whole body ached, but nothing seemed broken. Around him, the bridge was a mess of broken glass and sparking wires. Emergency lighting cast everything in a red glow. He walked to the main view screen, which was cracked but still working. Outside, he could see an alien forest unlike anything on Earth. The trees were tall and twisted, with bark that seemed to glow with a soft blue light. Strange plants covered the ground, some of them moving slightly, even though there was no wind. He could see. "Where are we exactly?" Lisa asked, joining him at the VIEWSCREEN. Jake checked his instruments. "About 300 kilometers from where we plan to land," he said. "Deep in what looks like a forest region." Nick appeared beside them, wiping oil from his hands with a dirty cloth. "The engines are completely fried," he reported. "It'll take days, maybe weeks to fix them. And that's if we can find the right materials." Amy was working at her station, trying to get their communications working again. "I can't reach anyone," she said. "The crash damaged our main antenna, and there's some kind of interference from the planet itself." Jake nodded grimly. He had expected this. They were on their own until they could repair their systems or find another way to call for help. "First things first," he said. "We need to secure the ship and check our supplies. And then we figure out what kind of world we've landed on." Through the broken view screen, strange sounds drifted in from the forest. Some were like bird calls, but deeper and more musical than anything from Earth. Others were harder to identify, low growls and rustling. That could have been wind or could have been something moving through the undergrowth. The light outside was strange too. Instead of the bright yellow sun they were used to, this world was lit by two smaller stars that gave everything a dim, twilight appearance. It was beautiful in its own way, but also alien and mysterious. "Look at those plants," Lisa said, pointing to some of the glowing vegetation visible near the ship. "They're bioluminescent. The whole ecosystem must have adapted to the lower light levels." As if responding to her words, some of the plants pulsed brighter for a moment before fading back to their soft glow. It was like watching a slow, silent conversation in light. Jake felt a mixture of excitement and worry as he looked out at their new surroundings. This was exactly the kind of discovery they had come to space to find. But they were also stranded, and alone, with no way to know what dangers might be waiting for them in the alien wilderness. 3 days had passed since the crash, and Jake was getting restless. The team had worked hard to make their situation more secure. Nick had managed to get the ship's basic life support systems running again, while Amy had rigged up a short-range communication system using parts from their emergency supplies. Lisa spent her time studying samples of the local plant life, fascinated by how everything seemed to glow softly in the dim light of the twin stars. But they still needed water, and their emergency supplies wouldn't last forever. Jake had spotted what looked like a stream about 2 kilometers from their crash site, visible from the ship's sensors before they had been damaged. Someone needed to go check it out. "I'll go," Jake announced as the team gathered around their makeshift planning table in the ship's common area. "The rest of you keep working on the repairs." "That's not smart," Nick said, looking up from a damaged circuit board he was trying to fix. "We don't know what's out there." "You should take someone with you," Jake shook his head. "We need everyone here working on the ship. Besides, I'm just going to check the water source and come right back. 2 hours, max." Lisa frowned at him from where she sat examining an alien plant sample under a portable microscope. "The local wildlife could be dangerous," she said. "I've been analyzing the ecosystem, and there are definitely large predators out there. I can tell from the way the smaller organisms behave." "I'll be careful," Jake promised, checking his plasma sidearm and emergency pack. "And I'll stay in radio contact the whole time." Amy looked worried as she adjusted the settings on their jury-rigged communication system. "The range is limited with this setup," she warned. "If you get much past 1 kilometer, we might lose you." Jake nodded and headed for the ship's main airlock. The forest outside was quiet in the early morning light of the twin stars. The air was cool and clean, with a faint sweet smell that reminded him of flowers. Bioluminescent plants dotted the forest floor like tiny blue and green stars. Creating a magical pathway through the trees, he moved carefully through the undergrowth, following the compass reading that should lead him to the water source. The forest was beautiful but alien in every way. The trees had smooth, twisted trunks that spiraled up toward the canopy, and their leaves rustled with sounds that were almost like whispers. Strange insects buzzed overhead, their wings glowing with soft patterns of light. After about 30 minutes of walking, Jake began to hear the sound of running water ahead. He pushed through a thick cluster of glowing bush and found himself at the edge of a clear stream that wound its way through the forest. The water looked clean and fresh, running over smooth stones that sparkled in the dim starlight. Jake knelt by the stream and filled his water bottles, then used his portable testing kit to check if it was safe to drink. While he waited for the results, he activated his radio. Base camp, this is Jake, he said. Found the water source? Looks good so far. Amy's voice crackled back through the static. Copy that, Jake. How's it looking out there? Beautiful but quiet, Jake replied. Maybe too quiet. I haven't seen any large animals yet, but Lisa was right about there being predators. I can see tracks in the mud by the stream. Something big definitely comes here to drink. The tracks were unlike anything he had seen on Earth. They were large, with 4 distinct toe marks and what looked like claw marks extending from each toe. Whatever had made them was probably the size of a large valve or bigger. Jake's testing kit beeped softly, showing that the water was safe to drink. He took a sip from one of the bottles and found it tasted clean and slightly sweet. At least they had solved their water problem. He was about to head back to the ship when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Somewhere in the distance, a scream echoed through the forest. It wasn't human, but it was definitely intelligent. The sound was filled with terror and desperation, the kind of cry that any thinking being would make when facing death. Jake froze, listening carefully. The scream came again, closer this time. It was coming from deeper in the forest, away from his ship and his team. Base camp, he said into his radio. Did you hear that? Hear what? Came Amy's voice, full of static. Never mind, Jake said. The radio range was too limited, and he was probably at the edge of their communication area already. The scream came a third time, and Jake felt something twist in his chest. Every instinct told him to go back to the ship, to stay safe with his team. But the sound was so desperate, so clearly a call for help. Whatever was making that noise was in serious trouble. Jake looked back toward where he knew his ship was hidden, among the trees. Then he looked toward where the screaming was coming from. His team was safe for now, working on repairs inside the protected hull of their vessel. But somewhere out there, someone or something was dying. He made his decision. Jake adjusted his pack and checked his weapon, then started moving through the forest toward the sound. The screaming continued, sometimes fading and sometimes getting louder. As he got closer, he could hear other sounds too. Growling and snarling like a pack of animals attacking something. The forest grew thicker as he moved away from the stream. The glowing plants here were different, pulsing with red and orange light instead of the peaceful blues and greens he had seen before. It was as if the very plants could sense the violence happening nearby. Jake's radio crackled with Amy's voice. Jake, report in. Your signal is getting weak. I'm following a distress call, Jake replied, pushing through a curtain of hanging vines. Something's in trouble out here. Jake, no, came Nick's voice over the radio. Get back here. We don't know what's out there? But Jake was already too far away, and the radio signal was breaking up into static. He turned off the device to save battery and focused on moving as quietly as possible through the underbrush. The screaming was getting closer now, and he could hear the sounds of a struggle. Whatever was happening, it was just ahead through a dense cluster of trees. Jake drew his plasma weapon and checked the charge indicator. It showed full power, enough for maybe 20 shots before it would need to be recharged. He crept forward until he could see through the trees to a small clearing ahead. What he saw there made him stop breathing for a moment. A group of creatures unlike anything he had ever imagined were circling something in the center of the clearing. They were massive, easily twice the size of earth wolves with sleek dark fur and glowing yellow eyes. Their bodies were built for hunting, with powerful legs and jaws filled with sharp teeth. There were at least 6 of them, maybe more, moving in the shadows at the edge of the clearing. In the center of their circle, backed against a large boulder, was the source of the screaming. It was clearly intelligent, clearly terrified, and definitely not human. But in that moment, Jake didn't care what species it was. All he could see was someone who needed help. Surrounded by predators and running out of time, the creatures were closing in for the kill, and Jake Morrison was the only one. Who could stop them? Jake stared through the trees at the scene in the clearing, his heart pounding hard in his chest. The creature being hunted was unlike anything he had ever seen, but there was no mistaking the intelligence in its movements and the fear in its cries. It was small and slender, maybe half his size, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer with soft patterns of light. Large eyes dominated its face, clearly adapted for the dim light of this world. The alien being pressed itself against the boulder, trying to make itself as small as possible while the pack of predators circled closer. One of the hunters, larger than the others with scars across its dark fur, stepped forward and showed its teeth in what could only be described as a cruel smile. It knew its prey had nowhere to run. Jake didn't think about the odds or the danger. He didn't calculate whether his weapon could handle 6 massive predators or wonder if he should go back for help. The only thought in his mind was simple and clear. Someone needed help, and he was here to give it. He burst through the trees into the clearing, shouting at the top of his lungs to get the predator's attention. "Hey, over here!" The effect was immediate. All 6 creatures spun toward him, their glowing eyes locking onto this new threat. The alien being stopped screaming and stared at Jake with wide, shocked eyes. It probably had never seen a human before and had no idea what to make of this strange newcomer charging into its death scene. The scarred leader of the pack snarled and took a step toward Jake, up close. The creature was even more terrifying than he had thought. It stood almost as tall as his chest, with muscles rippling under its dark fur and claws that looked like they could tear through metal. Its breath steamed in the cool air as it studied this unexpected opponent. Jake raised his plasma weapon and fired at the pack leader. The bright blue energy bolt struck the creature in the shoulder, spinning it around and making it roar in pain and anger. The smell of burned fur filled the clearing, but the beast was still standing, and now it looked furious. The other predators spread out, trying to surround Jake while their injured leader gathered itself for an attack. These were clearly intelligent hunters who knew how to work together to bring down prey. Jake realized he had maybe seconds before they would all attack at once. He fired again, this time at one of the creatures trying to circle behind him. The plasma bolt caught it in the leg, dropping it to the ground with a howl of pain. But that still left 4 healthy predators plus their wounded leader, and Jake could see more glowing eyes watching from the forest around the clearing. The pack leader charged, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. Jake dove to one side, rolling across the forest floor as massive jaws snapped shut where his head had been a moment before. He came up firing, putting 2 quick shots into the creature's side. This time the predator went down and stayed down, but its packmates were already moving. Jake spun around as another beast leaped at him from the left. He managed to get his weapon up in time, firing point-blank into its chest and feeling the heat of the plasma bolt wash over his face as the creature crashed into him. The impact knocked Jake backward into a tree trunk, driving the air from his lungs. His weapon flew from his hand and skittered across the ground toward the alien being he was trying to save. Pain shot through his back and shoulder, but he forced himself to keep moving as another predator lunged at him. Jake rolled away from snapping jaws and scrambled toward his fallen weapon. The alien being, seeing what he was trying to do, kicked the plasma gun toward him with one slender foot. Jake grabbed it and came up shooting, catching the attacking predator in mid-leap and sending it crashing to the ground. But more creatures were emerging from the forest. Jake could see at least 3 more sets of glowing eyes, and he was down to less than half power on his weapon. His back ached where he had hit the tree, and blood was running from scratches on his arms where claws had found their mark. The remaining predators seemed to sense that he was weakening. They moved more carefully now, having learned to respect his weapon, but they were still closing in. Jake backed toward the boulder where the alien being crouched, putting himself between it and the hunters. "Stay behind me," he said, not knowing if the alien could understand him, but hoping his intent was clear. One of the predators feinted to the left, then darted right as Jake turned to follow the movement. He was a fraction too slow, and claws raked across his leg, tearing through his uniform and into the flesh beneath. Jake stumbled but managed to stay on his feet, firing wildly at the retreating form. The alien being made a sound that might have been words in its own language. It pointed urgently at something behind Jake, and he spun around to see another predator launching itself at him from the shadows. He got his weapon up just in time, the plasma bolt catching the creature in midair and dropping it at his feet. Jake's weapon beeped a warning, low power. Maybe 5 shots left, and there were still at least 4 predators circling them. His leg was bleeding badly, making it hard to move quickly. And his shoulder ached from the earlier impact. But then something unexpected happened. The alien being stood up beside him, no longer cowering against the boulder. In its hands was a device that Jake hadn't noticed before, something that looked like a cross between a tool and a weapon. It made a high-pitched whining sound as the alien pointed it at the nearest predator. A beam of pure white light shot from the device, striking the predator and making it howl in pain. The creature stumbled backward, shaking its head as if it couldn't see properly. The alien had some kind of weapon after all, though it seemed designed to stun rather than kill, working together now. Jake and the alien being drove back the remaining predators. Jake used his plasma weapon to keep them at a distance, while the alien used its stunning device to confuse and disorient them. The hunters, already spooked by the loss of their pack leader and several of their numbers, finally decided that this prey was more trouble than it was worth. One by one, they melted back into the forest, their glowing eyes disappearing among the trees. Jake kept his weapon ready, listening for any sign that they might return, but the forest gradually grew quiet again. Only then did he allow himself to sink to the ground, exhaustion and pain catching up with him all at once. His leg was bleeding steadily and his whole body ached from the fight. But he was alive, and more importantly, so was the alien being he had saved. The creature approached him cautiously, its large eyes studying his face. It said something in its musical language, the tone clearly grateful even though Jake couldn't understand the words. Then it knelt beside him and examined his injured leg with gentle hands. Jake watched in amazement as the alien opened what looked like a small medical kit from its belt. The contents were unlike anything human doctors used, but the intent was clear. It was offering to help heal his wounds, just as he had helped save its life. "Thank you," Jake said softly, knowing the alien probably couldn't understand him, but hoping it would recognize the gratitude in his voice. The alien looked up at his face and made a sound that might have been its way of saying the same thing. Then it began to carefully clean and treat his injuries with supplies from its medical kit. Its touch surprisingly gentle for someone who had just been fighting for its life. As the alien worked, Jake got his first close look at this being he had risked everything to save. It was clearly female, with delicate features and graceful movements. The patterns of light under her skin shifted and changed like living artwork, probably some form of communication or emotional expression. Her eyes were large and kind, filled with intelligence and something that looked like wonder as she studied him in return. Jake Morrison had come to this planet as an explorer, looking for new worlds and new discoveries. He had never expected to make first contact with an alien species, and certainly not while fighting for their lives against a pack of savage predators. But as he sat in the clearing with this gentle being tending to his wounds, he realized that sometimes the most important discoveries happen when you simply chose to help someone in need. Jake winced as the alien finished treating his wounds with some kind of healing gel that felt cool against his torn skin. The substance worked faster than any human medicine he knew, already stopping the bleeding and reducing the pain in his leg. Whatever this being was, her people clearly had advanced medical knowledge. The alien sat back on her heels and looked at him with those large, expressive eyes. She pointed to herself and said something that sounded like Zara. Then she pointed at him with a questioning tilt to her head. "Jake," he said, pointing to himself. "My name is Jake." She tried to repeat it, the sound coming out softer and more musical than when he said it, but recognizable. "Jake," she said, and then smiled. The expression was so human-like that it startled him for a moment. Zara stood up and looked around the clearing where they had fought the predators. She made several sounds that Jake couldn't understand, but her tone was worried. She pointed toward the forest where the creatures had disappeared, then back at Jake. Clearly trying to communicate something important, Jake nodded, understanding her concern. "Yeah, they might come back," he said. "We should get out of here." He struggled to his feet, testing his injured leg. The alien medicine had helped a lot, but he was still sore and moving slowly. Zara immediately moved to his side, offering her shoulder to help support his weight. She was smaller than him, but surprisingly strong. Together, they made their way out of the clearing and back through the forest toward Jake's ship. The journey took much longer than usual, with Jake having to stop and rest several times. During these breaks, he and Zara began to communicate in simple ways. Using gestures and drawing pictures in the dirt, Zara drew a symbol that looked like a star with several planets around it, then pointed up at the sky. Jake understood that she was talking about space, about traveling between worlds. She pointed to herself, then to the star system she had drawn, indicating that she was from somewhere else, not from this planet. Jake drew his own simple picture of a spaceship, then pointed toward where his vessel was hidden among the trees. Zara's eyes widened with understanding and excitement. She drew her own ship, much larger and more elaborate than his simple sketch, then made gestures that seemed to indicate it was far away. As they continued walking, Jake tried to piece together Zara's story from her gestures and expressions. She had been part of some kind of expedition or research team studying this planet when they were attacked by the predators. Her people were peaceful, not used to fighting such savage creatures. She was probably the only survivor, separated from her group and assumed dead. When they finally reached the Starbound Explorer, Jake could see his team working outside the ship, taking advantage of the dim daylight to repair the damaged hull. Amy was the first to notice them approaching through the trees, and her shocked expression quickly brought the others running. "Jake, what happened to you?" Lisa called out as she saw his torn clothing and bandaged leg. Then her eyes fell on Zara, and her scientific mind immediately shifted into high gear. "Is that ... First contact," Jake said simply. "Everyone, meet Zara. Zara, this is my team." Nick stared at the alien with his mouth hanging open. Amy had her hand on her sidearm, not threatening but ready, while Lisa looked like all her birthdays had come at once. The xenobiologist in her was practically vibrating with excitement. Zara pressed closer to Jake's side, clearly nervous about meeting so many strange beings at once. Jake put a reassuring hand on her shoulder and spoke to his team. "She's peaceful," he said. "I found her being attacked by some kind of predator pack. She saved my life just as much as I saved hers." Lisa stepped forward slowly, her hands visible and empty. "Hello, Zara," she said in a gentle voice. "I'm Lisa." Zara looked at Jake, who nodded encouragingly. Then she pointed to herself and repeated her name, just as she had done with him. Lisa smiled and repeated the gesture, pointing to herself and saying her own name. Over the next several hours, the team worked together to establish better communication with their alien guest. Lisa's scientific training helped her identify patterns in Zara's language, while Amy's communication skills proved useful in setting up visual and gestural systems. They could all understand. Zara proved to be extremely intelligent and eager to communicate. She quickly picked up on their attempts to bridge the language gap and began teaching them words from her own language in return. The patterns of light under her skin, Jake learned, were indeed a form of emotional expression, shifting from soft blues when she was calm to brighter, more active patterns when she was excited or trying to explain something complex, through patient work with drawings and gestures. They learned that Zara's people were called the Velari. They were an advanced civilization that had been exploring space for thousands of years, studying different worlds and their ecosystems. Unlike humans, they had developed as a peaceful species, with no experience of warfare or violent conflict. This explained why Zara and her team had been so helpless against the predator pack. The Velari had never needed to develop weapons or fighting skills. Their technology was focused on exploration, research, and peaceful cooperation rather than conflict. Zara showed them the device she had used to help fight off the predators. It was designed as a research tool for studying animal behavior, using light and sound to influence creatures without harming them. She had improvised it as a weapon out of desperation, never having needed to use it for such a purpose before. The most exciting discovery came when Zara began drawing pictures of her people's technology. Her ship, which was hidden somewhere on the other side of the planet, contained advanced systems that could potentially help repair the Starbound Explorer. The Valari had developed highly sophisticated engineering techniques that could work with almost any material, but there was a problem. Zara's people believed she was dead, killed in the Predator attack along with the rest of her research team. Her ship would leave the planet in just a few days, following their predetermined schedule. Unless she could somehow contact them and let them know she was alive, the Valari ship was too far away for their current communication systems to reach. But Zara knew the location of several research stations her people had established across the planet. If they could reach one of those stations, they could send a message to the ship and arrange for rescue. Jake looked at his team as they absorbed this information. Nick was already calculating travel times and supply requirements. Amy was thinking about communication protocols and how to establish contact with an alien ship. Lisa was fascinated by the prospect of meeting an entire crew of Valari scientists and learning about their culture and technology. As for Jake himself, he felt a growing sense of responsibility towards Zara and her people. The Valari were peaceful explorers, much like his own team had been before they crashed on this dangerous world. The idea of them leaving without Zara, thinking she was dead, bothered him deeply. How far to the nearest research station? He asked Zara, using the simple word combinations they had worked out. Zara considered the question, and then began drawing a map in the dirt outside their ship. The distances were significant, across terrain that was probably filled with the same kind of predators they had already encountered. It would be a dangerous journey for his injured team and their alien companion, but as Jake looked at Zara's hopeful expression and thought about her people waiting for her return, he knew they had to try. They had come to space to explore and make contact with new civilizations. Now that they had found one, they couldn't just abandon the first member of that civilization who had trusted them. The decision was made. They would repair their ship. As much as possible, gather supplies, and set out across the alien wilderness to help Zara get home. It was exactly the kind of mission that Jake Morrison had joined the space exploration program to undertake, even if he had never imagined it. Would happen quite like this. As the twin stars began to set on their first day of true first contact. Jake watched Zara teaching Lisa some basic words in the Valari language while Nick and Amy planned their route to the research station. They were no longer just a crashed exploration team trying to survive on an alien world. They had become humanity's first ambassadors to another species, and the choices they made in the coming days would determine whether that relationship began with trust and cooperation or ended in tragedy and missed opportunity. The journey began at dawn on their second day after meeting Zara. Jake had spent most of the night working with Nick to get the Starbound Explorer's basic systems operational, while Lisa and Amy packed supplies and studied Zara's hand-drawn maps of the terrain they would need to cross. The alien research station was nearly 200 kilometers away, across mountains and through valleys that Zara indicated were home to many dangerous creatures. Zara herself had been restless during the night, her skin patterns shifting through worried colors as she tried to calculate whether they could reach the station in time. Her people's ship would only wait for 3 more days before departing the planet according to their schedule. If they missed that deadline, it could be months, or even years before another Valari expedition returned to this world. Jake shouldered his pack and checked his plasma weapon one more time. They had managed to recharge it using the ship's power systems, but he hoped they wouldn't need to use it again. The memory of fighting those predators was still fresh in his mind, along with the knowledge that there were probably much worse things waiting for them in the wilderness. "Everyone ready?" he asked, looking at his team and their alien companion. Nick adjusted the straps on his heavy pack, filled with repair tools and emergency supplies. "As ready as we'll ever be," he said. "The ship's locked down and the distress beacon is running on backup power. If anyone comes looking for us, they'll know where to find our base camp." Amy activated her portable communication unit, which would let them stay in touch with the ship's systems as long as they were within range. "We've got about 6 hours of contact before we're too far away," she reported. Lisa had spent the morning learning basic Valari phrases from Zara, and she was practically glowing with excitement despite the dangers ahead. "This is the greatest scientific expedition in human history," she said. "We're not just making first contact, we're actively helping another species return home." Zara listened to their preparations with growing understanding of their language. She had proven to be remarkably quick at learning human words and expressions, and she could now communicate basic ideas in simple English. Her musical accent made even the most ordinary words sound beautiful. "Thank you," she said to Jake, the words clear despite her alien pronunciation. "My people will remember this kindness." Jake nodded and started walking toward the forest. "Let's make sure we all live long enough for that to matter," he said. The first day of travel was relatively peaceful. They followed animal trails through the bioluminescent forest, with Zara serving as their guide to the safest routes. She knew which areas were claimed by territorial predators and which plants were dangerous to touch. Her knowledge of the local ecosystem proved invaluable as they navigated the alien wilderness. As they walked, Jake found himself learning about Valari culture and philosophy. Zara's people had evolved on a world without large predators, developing as a peaceful species focused on knowledge and exploration rather than conflict. They had achieved interstellar travel through cooperation and scientific advancement rather than through military conquest. "Your people fight often?" Zara asked during one of their rest stops, gesturing to Jake's weapon and the military style. "Equipment his team carried, sometimes," Jake admitted. "Humans have a long history of conflict, but we're trying to do better. That's part of why we explore space, to find new ways of thinking."